You know that moment when you solve an impossible problem and immediately wish you hadn't? That sick feeling when genius becomes horror. I felt it. October 3rd, 1942, watching a rocket punch through the sky at Peenemünde, while my hands shook so hard I couldn't hold the binoculars steady. 64 attempts had exploded. This one didn't. And that's what terrifies me still. Peenemünde Island, Baltic Sea, where October wind hits 40 miles per hour and salt spray freezes on your face before you can wipe it off. I was 31, propulsion engineer under Werner von Braun, and I'd spent 3 years trying to keep liquid oxygen from turning rockets into shrapnel. 64 craters in the sand, each one a $200,000 lesson in what kills you. That morning, the test bunker reeked of alcohol propellant mixed with 3 years of accumulated fear. We knew this was our last chance before Hitler cut funding and maybe cut us. But the A4, before it became the V2, before it killed thousands, taught me that some problems shouldn't be solved. She'd exploded 17 different ways. Turbopumps seized mid-ignition. Combustion chambers melted at 5,400 degrees. Fuel lines froze solid. Gyroscopes tumbled like drunks. Tail fins sheared clean off at Mach 2. Creative failures, each one. That frustration burned worse than watching B-17s bomb our facility monthly, because the rocket didn't care about our PhDs from Berlin, or our calculations, or Hitler's screaming deadlines. Just physics laughing in our faces, solve me or die trying. I stopped eating breakfast before tests, just threw it up anyway, watching metal become fire. I gave launch order with my voice cracking on the intercom. A4 number 65 ignited 600 feet away. Ground punched up through my boots. Roar that liquefied your lungs. Alcohol stink so strong my eyes watered. Through shaking binoculars, I watched her rise. Slow, then impossible fast. Like a black spear deciding heaven needed puncturing. 30,000 feet, 60,000. My God, 150,000 feet. Breath caught because maybe, just this once, mathematics would forgive 3 years of corpses and craters. She kissed space at 52 miles up, arced 119 miles downrange. Landed 2.5 miles from target, closer than we dreamed possible. Von Braun wept. The space rocket is born, but I saw Major Dornberger's face. Wehrmacht artillery, 3 wars deep, dead eyes that had ordered men into worse. He showed me production orders that night. 3,000 of these. London, no warning, no defense. You gave us the key. I'd argued we built this for space, for science, for humanity reaching beyond Earth. He smiled without warmth. Engineering has no loyalty. Only capability. You solved it. We choose the target. I understood then. Some doors shouldn't have keys. We'd built perfection, handed it to monsters, and the mathematics didn't care about our intentions. 8 hours earlier, I sat in the observation bunker at Peenemünde, where the October wind hammered against the reinforced concrete at 40 miles per hour. Inside, the air was stagnant, smelling of wet wool, stale tobacco, and the sharp, metallic tang of ozone from the high-voltage banks. I was 31, shivering not just from the Baltic chill that seeped through the walls, but from a terror I couldn't name. Klaus Richter, my lead combustion technician, sat across from me. He was only 29, but looked 50, with deep lines carved into a face gray from exhaustion. He had third-degree burn scars twisting up his left forearm, a souvenir from the explosion of Attempt 42. He never spoke of the pain, but when the warning siren wailed at 330 hours, cutting through the wind like a knife, he looked at me with hollow eyes that said he knew the truth I was refusing to see. "Science or weapon, Doctor?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper over the hum of the heater. My throat tightened. I looked away because I had been lying to myself for 3 years, and we both knew it. The pre-launch calibration took exactly 47 minutes. I had performed this ritual 70 times before, My hands moved across the grey steel console without conscious thought, guided by muscle memory alone. Liquid oxygen feed valve, counterclockwise 3 turns. Click, ethanol pressure gauge, 290 psi minimum. Click, gyroscope, platform alignment, 0.001 degrees maximum deviation. Click. Each switch snapped into place with mechanical finality. But when my hand hovered over the master arming switch, my fingers betrayed me. A slight rhythmic tremor. Klaus noticed. He always did. "Steady, doctor," he murmured, not looking up from his clipboard. I told him it was just the coffee, just the fatigue. I lied. Admitting the fear meant admitting that 64 failures, millions of Reichsmarks, and 3 years of my life might be meaningless. My daughter Anna had turned 6 2 days ago in Hamburg. She'd sent me a drawing, Papa standing next to a silver rocket flying to the moon. I hadn't seen her since January. This rocket had to fly today, just not toward the moon I had promised her. The launch order came at 9:43 hours. My voice cracked over the intercom as I said the word, Zündung. A4 rocket number 65 ignited 600 feet downrange. The shockwave didn't just hit the bunker, it punched through the floor and hammered my chest hard enough to stop my heart for a split second. It was a roar beyond sound, pure pressure liquefying the air, vibrating the fillings in my teeth. The alcohol propellant mixed with liquid oxygen created a stench that defied description, like industrial cleaning solvent burning in the deepest part of hell. Through my Zeiss binoculars, which shook despite my white-knuckled grip, I watched her climb. At first, she was slow, heavy, a 14-ton obelisk fighting the earth. Then, impossibly fast, a black and white spear deciding heaven needed puncturing. 30,000 feet. Klaus whispered, "Gott im Himmel." 60,000. 90,000. For 12 seconds the math held. For 12 seconds I believed we had opened the door to the stars. She reached 52 miles in altitude. Space. Actual space. The curve of the Earth was visible to the machine, if not to us. She arced 119 miles downrange and impacted exactly 2.5 miles from the calculated target. Werner von Braun wept openly. He hugged me hard enough to crack a rib, laughing like a child. "We did it, Werner! Humanity's first space vehicle." But across the jubilant test field, Major Dornberger stood motionless. A Wehrmacht artillery officer of 51, with the ghosts of 3 wars buried in his dead eyes. He didn't see a spaceship. That evening, in his office reeking of cheap schnapps and cigarette ash, he spread the production orders across his desk. 3,000 units. London, Antwerp, Paris. This ends the war. I stammered. I talked about scientific purposes, about the nobility of space exploration, about the future. He smiled like a teacher correcting a slow student. "Engineering serves whoever funds it, Werner. You gave us the key. We choose the door." I understood then. My mathematics would kill thousands who would never hear it coming. And 4,000 miles west, someone was about to learn that the same physics couldn't be stopped by courage alone. I learned about Wing Commander James Whitmore years later, through intelligence intercepts we weren't supposed to see. It was September 1944, 2 years after our breakthrough. He was stationed in an RAF fighter command bunker beneath London, where the autumn rain turned the Thames to lead, and the previous night's V2 impact had killed 19 civilians in Stepney. Intelligence reports said Whitmore was 38, had 11 confirmed Luftwaffe kills, and wore a distinguished flying cross that meant his wife saw him shake awake screaming 3 nights a week. Our rockets, they called them Big Ben, because the explosion arrived before the radar signature, made him obsessed in ways that terrified me because they mirrored my own obsession at 31. Whitmore filled 14 notebooks with trajectory mathematics he barely understood. He built scale models from blurred reconnaissance photos and twisted aluminum fragments recovered from craters in Chiswick. His wife, Margaret, left him after he chose to study radar plots instead of celebrating their 10th anniversary. He didn't even notice she was gone for 2 days. Klaus showed me the Intercept report one night in the barracks. "Someone else is paying for your science, Doctor," he said quietly. I had no answer. The obsession escalated exactly as mine had. Whitmore convinced RAF Command to attempt an intercept, a suicide mission against math itself. October 14th, 1944. 6 Spitfires scrambled when our launch site at The Hague fired at 11:47 hours. The intercepts described the climb, pilots pushing their machines to 35,000 feet, the absolute ceiling where Merlin engines screamed in the thin air and lips turned blue despite oxygen masks. Frost crystallized on the inside of the cockpits, coating the leather and wool in white dust. Whitmore achieved a radar lock. He held it for 38 seconds, a record that stood until the war's end. He thought maybe physics would bend just once for the defenders. I know he thought this because I had thought the same thing 64 times before success. Through his windscreen, he saw what I had launched. A dark needle climbing vertically, its contrail perfect as a geometric proof. My rocket continued to 55 miles altitude, the edge of space where wings have nothing to push against, then arced earthward at 3,580 miles per hour, 5 times faster than his Spitfire's maximum dive speed. It fell like mathematics made visible. It impacted Woolwich Arsenal moments later. The shockwave flattened 2 city blocks, killed 43 people. Whitmore could only watch the white plume of dust rise from the city below, untouched and untouchable. Intelligence reports said Whitmore vomited in the hallway after landing. Group Captain Morrison, 51, a man who flew reconnaissance in the Great War and was weathered like old oak, sat with him for hours in the silent mess hall. Their conversation was intercepted through our network. Morrison's words haunted me then, and still do. "You can't intercept what operates in a realm where wings don't work, Jimmy. They aren't building aircraft, they are building controlled meteors." Whitmore understood then what I had understood in 1942. Some technologies create asymmetries so absolute that courage becomes irrelevant. Physics doesn't negotiate with bravery, and gravity doesn't care about flags. Klaus found me reading that intercept at 0200, weeks after Launch 65's success. The paper shook in my hands. "He tried stopping what you built, Doctor." "I know," I whispered. "Does that make you proud or ashamed?" Klaus asked. I couldn't answer then. I still can't. But 6 months later, at Mittelbau-Dora, someone else would pay the price neither Whitmore nor I had calculated into our respective equations. Production required bodies, and SS Sturmbannführer Otto Förster was ready to provide them. I learned about Förster only after the war, during the Nuremberg testimonies I was forced to witness as a person of interest. March 1945. The Mittelbau-Dora underground factory was a circle of hell where fluorescent lights hummed continuously, banishing the concept of day and night. The air stayed a damp 55 degrees year-round because 600 feet of solid mountain pressed overhead. Förster was 43, a man who had risen through party loyalty rather than competence, wearing an Iron Cross earned at a desk in Berlin. Germany was collapsing, the capital was burning. But Albert Speer had called personally. 900 V2s monthly or face consequences. Förster's spine straightened at the order. German efficiency would triumph because failure meant court-martial, disgrace, and his family dishonored. My mathematics had become his production quota. My breakthrough was his weapon. My dream was his nightmare to manufacture. Testimony transcripts showed he coordinated 4 underground factories, 60,000 prisoners, French, Polish, Russian, Jewish, Belgian, worked 18-hour shifts assembling components for weapons that wouldn't save anyone. Chief Engineer Schmidt, 47, a civilian contractor who'd built factories across occupied Europe, warned him directly. The trial transcripts recorded the exchange verbatim. Schmidt: "We are killing workers faster than we are replacing them." "The skill level is dropping." Förster slammed his hand on the desk. "They exist to serve the Reich, Schmidt." He increased shifts to 20 hours. He cut rations by another 10%. My elegant fuel pump design required precision assembly to within microns. Förster provided dying hands, shaking with typhus, and expected perfection. Klaus told me after liberation, "Your science, their slavery, Doctor. You drew the lines, they dug the tunnels." April 3rd, 1945. Förster ordered a massive simultaneous push. 300 V2s in 72 hours for Hitler's birthday. Testimony showed that 180 prisoners collapsed from exhaustion in the first 12 hours alone. Förster had them shot for sabotage and replaced immediately with fresh bodies from the trains. Tunnel A produced 17 defective units. My gyroscopes misaligned. Fuel lines improperly sealed because starving hands couldn't maintain the torque. Quality Inspector Hauptmann Becker, 33, with 3 engineering degrees, reported the failures. Förster struck him personally across the face, threatening arrest for defeatism. "German engineering doesn't fail," he screamed. But it did. My engineering failed when the human cost exceeded human capacity. April 5th, 1945. RAF bombers struck the external depot using reconnaissance intel gathered from flight paths Whitmore couldn't intercept. It was surgical precision. 400 tons of high explosives collapsed the entrance to Tunnel C. 340 prisoners and 16 SS guards were buried alive under 20,000 tons of rock. Förster stood in the rubble hours later, testimony said. Concrete dust coated his uniform like a ghost. He bent down and found one of my fuel pump assemblies. Aluminum twisted by the explosion, covered in blood he couldn't identify as German or prisoner. It weighed 40 pounds, 40 pounds of failed ideology. General Major Kammler, 53, who had seen the mathematics of death at Stalingrad, approached him slowly. His words were recorded by an aide. "We have killed 20,000 building these. The weapons have killed 9,000 enemy. We are bombing ourselves, Otto." Förster kept the pump. The testimony confirmed it. A reminder that pride costs more than defeat ever could. American troops liberated Mittelbau-Dora 3 weeks later. They found 30,000 survivors too weak to stand. They found mass graves containing bodies that died building my science. Klaus made me read every page of the testimony. "You need to know, Doctor, what your breakthrough cost." I knew. That's why I agreed to testify. Why I told them everything about the guidance systems. Why I carried my shame like Förster carried that pump, 40 pounds of aluminum that weighed more than any medal I was ever given. 62 years after the breakthrough. I stood in the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., where the climate control maintained a polite 68 degrees and V2 number 47 hung suspended 30 feet above the polished terrazzo floors. The Cold War had ended 15 years prior. Germany was reunified. Former enemies were now trading partners. I had become Werner Schmidt, a retired aerospace consultant who taught at Caltech for 30 years and helped design the Saturn V fuel systems using mathematics learned through 64 failures. Now, 93, silver-haired, my hands were finally steady. I reached up and touched the V2's titanium fin. It was cold, smooth, real, not the demon of 1942, just engineering. Beautiful equations made into metal that killed thousands. Dr. Schmidt? The voice was British, measured, aged like fine wine. Wing Commander James Whitmore, 98, leaning heavily on a cane, wearing an RAF insignia on his civilian jacket, approached slowly. I was over London. I tried intercepting these things. Recognition flooded in both directions. October 14th, 1944. 6 Spitfires at 35,000 feet, I said. His eyes widened behind thick glasses. That was yours? My mathematics, yes. Your 38-second lock was extraordinary. We stood silent for a long moment. 30 seconds, containing 60 years of history. He laughed, a sound of exhausted truth, not bitterness. Chasing something flying where wings don't work, he murmured. I nodded. And building something that flew beyond my control. Excuse me. We turned together. Otto Förster, 102 years old, wheelchair-bound, accompanied by his great-granddaughter Sarah, 24, rolled closer. He was hesitant, shrinking into his heavy coat. In his lap, he carried a twisted aluminum fragment. I oversaw production. Mittelbau-Dora. The silence stretched, painful and heavy. 20,000 died building these. 9,000 died from these. His hands shook violently as he held up the pump I had designed. I kept this 59 years, a reminder. Sarah, a medical student at Oxford, looked at us and asked softly, "Were you enemies? Was it simple good versus evil?" Whitmore answered first, looking up at the rocket. "No, child. Both sides were brilliant." I added, my voice trembling. Both sides were brave. Förster finished, his voice breaking into a whisper. Both sides paid costs mathematics didn't calculate. We stood together. 3 old men who had learned the same lesson through different failures. Physics doesn't negotiate, I said quietly. Whitmore continued. Courage can't intercept mathematics. Förster whispered. Pride costs more than defeat. Sarah looked up at the V2 with an innocent curiosity we had all lost decades ago. Will we build something like this again? Something too powerful to control? We glanced at each other. Somewhere, engineers were dreaming of hypersonics. Adversaries were planning counters. The cycle was continuing. Yes, we answered together. Because that is the story. Not victory or defeat, but humans pushing limits while physics refuses compromise. I walked toward the exit and stopped, turned back one last time. The V2 hung silhouetted against the massive windows showing the blue sky. Above it, a commercial jet, subsonic, ordinary, predictable, left a white trail. I smiled because somewhere now, engineers dreamed of something faster. And somewhere, adversaries tried to stop them. This is eternal, humans pushing boundaries and resisting being surpassed. Mathematics is unforgiving. Reality refuses compromise, but humans try anyway. 4,000 missiles launched, 34 years of Cold War, 0 intercepts, not an American victory or a Soviet loss. This was physics refusing to negotiate with ideology. Speed isn't patriotic. Altitude isn't German or British or American. Engineering serves whoever pays the price, the moral price, the human price, the price I paid watching my science become slaughter. For one brief, perfect moment, one machine embodied absoluteness so completely that even enemies could only witness in awe and learn. Sometimes victory is simply being impossible to touch. Sometimes defeat is being untouchable but losing your humanity. Sometimes the door shouldn't have had a key.